Good morning. Today is June the 16th, the day after Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, everybody. So this is Father's Day Monday. One of my favorite holidays. Father's Day Monday. Like it's the Monday after Father's Day. And it's a great day to celebrate fathers. How was your Father's Day?
It was great.
Mine was as well. Today, we are going to be discussing something very interesting. We're going to be talking about ourselves a little bit, our church, in a sense, I guess, within the grand scope of church history. We're going to be looking through church history, starting with the Jerusalem Council, talking about, or asking the question of why Presbyterianism, why this mode of church government, and why we are Presbyterian. That's what we'll be talking about this morning. You are listening to the Dear Church Podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church Podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene, Junsuk, and Brian here. No Pastor Daryl or Pastor Virgil, sadly.
He's sad.
I would love for them to be in this studio one day, though. This is our little home, our headquarters, as some may call. And I would love to have them here. But we do miss them dearly as they are back in their respective homes doing their respective ministry. So we're very thankful for their ministry and their work. Today, Pastor Gene, we're going to be talking about church history. I know that not many of us may be too familiar with church history. I don't think we've really ever done a podcast on church history too much. Maybe one or two back when we first started. But we wanted to kind of go in the next two episodes, talk about church history a little bit, and see why we are Presbyterian today. What has led to the Presbyterian Church being the Presbyterian Church? And then I think in a couple episodes, we're even going to be discussing the different denominations that are out there, the Reformed ones, of course, and kind of talking about the differences between those. I believe that is the view, the vision, right?
Yeah, it's not a comprehensive history, but it will be an abridged history from the Council of Jerusalem all the way to, our Presbyterian roots.
Yeah, because I think the question that we want to answer is why Presbyterianism? Why this ecclesiology? Why do we do it this way? Why is this the correct biblical mode or polity within church in church government? Why?
Ecclesiology.
Ecclesiology. I thought I said that. Didn't I say that?
Nope.
Ecclesiology. So that is what we'll be talking about today. What does the Bible show us about church government? How do we see that played out in church history? Why Presbyterianism? We're going to start by looking at the Bible. Acts chapter 15. This is where we see what is known as the Jerusalem Council in the Apostolic Church, meaning, I guess we say Apostolic Church now, but what I mean by that is the church in which the apostles were there. This is Acts chapter 15. But some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And after Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas and some of the others were appointed to go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the church, they passed through both Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail the conversion of the Gentiles, and brought great joy to all the brothers. When they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church and the apostles and the elders, and they declared all that God had done with them. But some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees rose up and said, "It is necessary to circumcise them and to order them to keep the law of Moses." The apostles and the elders were gathered together to consider this matter. And then continuing on, skipping a couple verses, this is verse 22. Then it seemed good to the apostles and the elders with the whole church to choose men from among them and send them to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. They sent Judas, called Barsabbas, and Silas, leading men among the brothers. with the following letter. The brothers, both the apostles and the elders, to the brothers who are of the Gentiles in Antioch and Syria and Cilicia, greetings. So from this text, Thomas Witherow in his book, The Presbyterian Distinctives, puts it this way. Let it be remarked that in the simple narrative, the following facts stand noticeably out. Number one, that Barnabas and Paul had a dispute about circumcision with certain false teachers who came down from Judea. Number two, this dispute was not settled in the church of Antioch where it originated. Number three, the matter was referred to an external ecclesiastical assembly consisting of the apostles and elders at Jerusalem. Number four, this assembly met publicly to deliberate on the question. Number five, they pronounced a decision. Number six, to this decision, the church of Antioch and the churches of Syria and Cilicia yielded submission. So he's defending the fact that there was a higher body. There was an ecclesiastical assembly consisting of apostles and elders that made certain decisions on theology. And this is what he writes as well. That a record of this is inserted in the Holy Scripture seems strange if these things did not happen for an example to us. Were it enough for the church of Antioch to made certain of the mind of God upon the point in dispute, Paul, who was present, could have declared this with infallible accuracy. Of course, this is because Paul was a leader who often decided matters that were equally important by a word from his lips or a stroke of his pen as he was led by the Lord. So the fact that it went to the elders and the apostles as a counsel for the matter to be decided, then handed down to the churches, was not only a one-time occurrence for the matter at hand, but also to serve as a model for us to follow in similar circumstances. So it's really interesting because I think one of the responses that people can give about Acts 15 not being a model or an example to follow could be that this was a one-time thing during this era. This matter needed to be solved. That's why this council was assembled. But as Thomas Witherow says, it's very evident from what we see in this text that Paul could have made a decision there in Antioch, but instead it was brought forth to the council in Jerusalem, decided by the brothers, sent back to the brothers at Antioch, and it was obeyed there. And so we see a system of local churches being held accountable, being ruled in a sense by a higher ecclesiastical body.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever an instance in history that's like this one, but all other things that happen after the Council of Jerusalem is kind of mimicking this, or it has come from this kind of model that they set for us. But yeah, we have some people that said, everybody needs to be circumcised, they need to follow the law of Moses. And Paul and Barnabas said, no, they don't need to do this. You don't need to follow the full Jewish law.
Yeah.
And then people were confused. Like, so we don't follow anything? We follow some? We follow all? None? And so there was a huge dispute. And so this dispute, like many other councils that come after this, threatened to split the church. And so if you teach this, then it was a different teaching than the rest of the church, or, people can't be teaching a variety of doctrines that oppose each other in one and the same church. So Paul could have said this, saying, this is what it is, that's it. And yet, what if other, let's say, apostles, people with some authority as well, were teaching something different? Mm-hmm. So they needed to get it straight. So they convened in Jerusalem. And this is what happened. This sets a precedent for all other councils after and meetings after, how we could collectively resolve disputes in the church. And there were a ton of disputes, a lot of controversies in the church. And obviously this resonates with the Presbyterian church because it was decentralized. It wasn't a top-down thing. People got together, and Presbyterian churches use like synods and assemblies to decide matters. And what we see here is it really does resonate with the council that was held at Jerusalem. It affirmed what was core in the doctrine of the faith, and then it was able to deny or say this is not part of our doctrine, saying if you do this, this is not part of our doctrine of faith in the church. And thereby, what it did was not only clarify the doctrine, it clarified who was in the church.
I'm curious though. So after reading, Acts 15 and studying it and reading Thomas Witherow's commentary on it, it's hard for me to see why you would not subscribe to a Presbyterian model. No, so I'm genuinely curious. Have you heard perhaps arguments for, let's just say, a Baptist model, a Congregationalist model, or how do they interpret Acts 15? Because it seems very, very clear that this was a model that was set as an example for us to follow. And we can clearly see that there is a council here that rules over local churches.
Yeah. Well, I'm not here to argue the Baptist ecclesiology. But, you could also argue that maybe this is a one-time only thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't. I mean, just
right.
200, 300 years later, something else comes up.
So we're going to fast forward a couple hundred years. We do see multiple councils happening throughout the history of Christianity, first being the Council of Nicaea in 325. So let me just kind of give you the context of what had happened here. In Alexandria, in the year 318, and this is, by the way, from the book 1,000 Years of Church History. Great book by Nick Needham. So that's we need him actually for this. So that's where we're getting this information, and sometimes even quotes. So in Alexandria, in the year 318, a presbyter by the name of Arius taught that the Father alone was God. Now, of course, to us who are familiar with the Bible, we would think, what's wrong with that? Deuteronomy 6, we believe that God is one. Christianity is a monotheistic religion. But the issue was that he not only taught that the Father alone was God, but then that the Son was a created being. He was the first of creation, formed out of nothing before the universe was created. The Son was the first and the greatest of all creation, and the Son is closer to God than the rest of creation. But he's still a created being. He's a creature. And Arius would say things like, God created everything else through the Son, the rest of creation relates to God through the Son. And so he tries to give the Son prominence, but the fact of the matter is Arius still believed that the Son was created in order to preserve the idea that God is one, because he thought that if God the Father was God and God the Son was God, then you'd have two gods. And that doesn't make sense in the Bible because we know that God is one. And so he had this thought that Christ was created. In response to this, a bishop by the name of Alexander, also from Alexandria, went against this and taught that the Son was fully and truly God in an absolute sense, as the Father was. Now, the problem was he had to show that the Father and Son are truly God at the same time, preserving the oneness of God, the aloneness of God. And so because these two views that oppose each other were starting to divide the church, there were a lot of followers to both of these views. The first Christian emperor, Constantine, summoned the first ecumenical council of bishops from all over the Eastern Empire, and a couple from the West, to figure this out. The council met at Nicaea, which is in Asia Minor, in the year 325 AD. 300 bishops were present, and from this council we have what is called the Nicene Creed, which affirms the deity of Christ. Specifically, in the Nicene Creed, we say, from the essence of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not created, of the same essence as the Father. Arius refused to sign the Creed of Nicaea, and so he was sent into exile. That's a Nicene Creed.
Yeah.
And I think here we see another council, an example of another council, after the age of the apostles, in which we see doctrine being shaped according to Scripture by this council, then handed down to the local churches to then follow along, to follow suit, because this is correct doctrine.
Yeah. This is where we get homoousios.
Yes, of the same essence.
Yeah. So you have to believe that to belong to the church.
Yep.
Again, this threatened to divide the church. Some wanted to believe what Arius was teaching, And so if you believe that, can you still be a Christian? And so there is a clear dividing line. If you do not believe that Christ is first before all of creation and of the same essence with God, so this is what they added to make sure that this is what you mean when you say that, then you are not part of the Christian church.
Yeah. You know, as I was doing some research on these councils, it kind of made me feel bad for them a little bit. I'm not trying to make heretics look good or anything, but it's kind of like, dang, they were really trying their best, but they were just so off the mark. Like this dude really, really wanted to preserve the oneness of God, but he was just in doing that, he refused to acknowledge the deity of Christ, which obviously is what are you doing? But moving right along.
Yeah. Well, before you move right along,
There
is one thing that is a little different from the council at Jerusalem and this one. And that was, this council was called by Constantine that you mentioned.
Yes, the emperor.
And so it was the first, council to be called by the Roman emperor. And so there is this idea now, like, now are these councils, of course, you're going to go by what the Bible says. You're going to argue from the Bible. You're going to also, just like the Council of Jerusalem, you're going to get together with equals and then discuss it. But it wasn't called by anyone higher. And so this one is a little bit different from the Council of Jerusalem. And I think we should take note of that, because later on we'll see that, emperors don't call church meetings now, or, kind of, if you have an ecclesiological debate, you don't have an emperor calling that, like the president of the United States doesn't call it, and things like that. But this one was pretty special because Constantine did call it. And what Constantine also saw was there was, this kind of dissension in the church, but also what Constantine did then was it started the beginning of very close, if not just in the same place, ties with the church and state. And so this is the beginning of that we see in history. And so with the aim to unify the church, we start seeing the state also start to go into the church. It's something that we should keep in mind, especially as this will lead to eventually the Great Schism, which we'll talk about maybe in the next podcast.
Yeah. So I think this stuff is really interesting because, like you said, Constantine was the first emperor to call an ecumenical council, and he was actually a big part of it. Whereas today we try to keep ourselves, state and church very, very separate. He was a huge part of this council. I think I've read somewhere that he was even the moderator. I might be wrong, but he had a huge part to do with this council, and so that is very interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. Moving right along, we have more debates that came about. Whereas the first one was concerning the relationship of the Father to the Son. This time it was on the nature of the Son, or as we like to call it today, the hypostatic union. This time we have Nestorius on one side, who in efforts to preserve the humanness of Christ, because Christ had to be human and obey God as a human to represent human beings, they emphasize this humanness, and in efforts to do this, they made a big distinction between Christ's human and divine nature. They, in essence, split him into two persons by trying to keep Christ's human nature as far away from the divine as possible. And this was the thought of the theologians from the church at Antioch, which is interesting because Acts 15, Church of Antioch. On the other side, the theologians from Alexandria disagreed. They emphasized the divine nature of Christ. They emphasized the need for the divine in salvation. And so they put all the words, actions, and experiences of Christ recorded in the Gospels to be not of a human person, but of God himself. So the Alexandrians united the two natures as close as possible at the expense of the human nature. They didn't really like the fact that we have to include the human nature in Christ's natures. So this was a raging debate that led to the Council of Ephesus, at which Nestorius was exiled and then later along, led to the Council of Chalcedon, or Chalcedon. How do you pronounce? How do you say that?
K.
Oh, it's a k sound. Chalcedon. Chalcedon. In 451. So what happened here is the Emperor Marcian called for a council at Chalcedon. 400 bishops were present, and we have what is now called the definition of Chalcedon. It's the combination of the Christologies of both Antioch and Alexandria. And I'm not saying that this was done as a way of simply compromising, right? Because it kind of seems like they were on two extremes, but because they believed that this was biblically correct. And they said that Christ is at once complete in deity and complete in humanity, truly God and truly man, consisting of a rational soul and body of the same essence as the Father in his deity. So this council defined the two natures of Christ, fully divine and fully human, leading to further schisms actually later on, such as a split with the Oriental Orthodox churches. It also elevated the Bishop of Constantinople's status, creating tension with Rome, like you said, which will lead to the schism, because now we have the Bishop of Constantinople and the Bishop of Rome kind of like almost they're kind of fighting for power at this rate. And so it leads to the schism later on.
Yeah, I mean, the Council of Ephesus we skipped, but
yes, we did.
We can't do everything.
Yeah,
it's important, right, to know about what the church thought about Mary and things like that. But Chalcedon is a huge one because is Christ just one nature? That's where we also get monophysitism. Right?
Yes.
So Christ only has one nature, and then like the divine kind of swallows up. Well, the divine kind of swallows up the human nature, that kind of thing. And so he's not really human in that sense. Yep. And so that was denied, and that was deemed as heretical. And so we got this. So if you took classes in church history, you know about this. I want to go toward more why it matters in the kind of narrative arc that we're trying to create here of our ecclesiology now.
Yeah.
And what we'll see here, obviously, historically, is there is further from the Council of Ephesus now to the Council of Chalcedon, there is a greater shift or a split between the East and West churches, like you said, which is going to lead again to the Great Schism. But what we are trying to define here with councils are what is orthodox and what is heterodox. And so this is what Reformed theology is. What is orthodox? What is heterodox? And people are saying, why can't we just make everything okay? Like, why do we always have to, why does it always look like we're fighting or arguing or debating?
Yeah.
This is throughout church history, my friends. If you don't know what orthodox belief is, you may belong to a heretical church with heretical doctrines, and heresy means outside. You're outside of orthodox, which means you will not go to heaven. If you hold these doctrines, that means you don't believe in the true God, the true Christ. And so this is why it's so important, because we were trying to define, this is the area or the circle of what you need to believe to understand or to really believe who Jesus Christ is. Because you can't just call anything Jesus Christ. You can't be like, this cup that I'm holding, I believe is Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ saves. So I believe in this cup. As ridiculous as it is, like, we need to figure out then who is the real Jesus Christ. And so this is why all these councils started to convene. And I want to point out a little bit about some of the stuff that happened in the aftermath or the results of these convenings, where you would see like a more strengthening of, let's say, the Roman Church.
So all of this stuff is really interesting because I think some doctrines that we take to be granted today, like, if you were to ask a Reformed Christian, how many natures does Christ have? It's like, 2 natures, 1 person. This was not always obvious to people. People didn't always know this. this was decided and really taught through the decisions that these councils made. And so I think this stuff is important to know.
Yeah. I think this is part of our confessions now.
So now we move right along, actually another, not 100 years, 20 or so years, to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. This is the deposition of the last Roman emperor in the West, marking the end of the Western Roman Empire, leaving the Bishop of Rome, who is the Pope, as a major authority figure in the West amid political fragmentation. So at the time, the power of the papacy grew under Gregory I. When the Western Roman Empire was defeated, the Roman Catholic Church survived, and Pope Gregory actually did something that was never done before. He started making power moves.
It's not really the Roman Catholic Church. It's just
it was the Catholic Church, the Western Church, right?
Right.
Sorry, the Western Church. Later on to be the Roman Catholic Church, but at this point, the Western Church. Pope Gregory I was making these power moves. He made treaties with the invaders and started acting with political independence. He grew the papacy into a powerful social and political institution using the resources that he had, because at that time, the papacy actually owned a lot of land of the Mediterranean. And so the papacy had a lot of power by itself as an institution. And so he governed actually the western central region of Italy as an independent state. And I think this is where we see really the power of the Western Church start to climb even above governments.
Well, with the fall of the Roman Empire, right, there was a vacuum. And the Pope filled that vacuum as a major authority figure in the West, not just religiously, but politically. Mm-hmm. It is a pretty pivotal point in history, especially in the Western part of the world, because it starts the beginning of the Middle Ages, but it also has profound implications of the Christian church going forward. It's going to shape how we think, what we did, how we view authority, and obviously it's going to affect how Presbyterianism came about and what we believe as Presbyterians.
And so I think what's interesting about this is we see the development of the papacy become a powerful force in the West. Of course, we have, like we had mentioned before, the Bishop of Rome, who is the Pope, and the Bishop of Constantinople, the Church in the East. I believe it's modern-day Turkey, Constantinople. Yep. And the Bishop of Rome continually claiming primacy over other bishops. And that's why we have a kind of tension later on with the Church of the West and the Church of the East. And key figures are Pope Leo I and Pope Gregory I, like we mentioned just now. But I guess my question is, why are we talking about this? What about the Western Church? What about the papacy helps us understand the formation of Presbyterianism?
Presbyterians will either start to receive this or reject this. All the things that happened in the pre-Great Schism church, and so this isn't just out there just to say, this is just some kind of trivia that you could know for maybe a test that you might randomly have at a bar.
I don't know if they would have, unless it's a Christian bar.
Yeah.
I've never seen a Christian bar, actually.
I'm Idaho, Moscow.
That might be a thriving market. If anyone wants to open a Christian bar, I don't know what you would call it.
Anyway.
Heavy laden.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, but this is the world, though. We need to understand the world to see how we ended up where we are. So I get it. There's a lot of focus on papal authority, but that's the world at the time. And the fact that the reformers came out and rejected it is a huge deal, because guess what happened? We go on to the next part, and then that'll kind of clear things up.
So within this time frame where the papacy is developing and growing stronger and stronger, there are two things that happen that we're going to talk about. First, the Carolingian, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Carolingian Renaissance, which is under Charlemagne, not the radio host, but Charlemagne, the actual king, the Holy Roman Emperor. There was a revival of learning and church reform in Western Europe, and through this, he standardized liturgy, promoted education and strengthened ties between the church and the state. This was in the 8th and 9th centuries. Then we have the Cluniac reforms in the 10th and 11th centuries. And so this is all the while the papacy is growing in power. And it originated from the monastery of Cluny, not George, Cluny, founded in 910 AD. And these reforms were aimed to purify the church by addressing corruption, such as simony, which is buying church offices, and clerical marriage.
So let me first go over, before we get to the Cluniac reforms and what happened at Charlemagne, let's go over the development of the papacy, which happened from the 5th to the 11th centuries. Just that part there. So what we're seeing is that Rome started to gather more and more power increasingly over time, over what we know as the Petrine doctrine.
Yes.
And that means that they consider Peter as the first pope, and they used that line where Christ would go to Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church.
And the keys, right?
Yeah. And so they're saying, upon this rock I will build my church, and they interpreted that as Peter is the rock that will build that Christ will build his church on. So he must have been the first pope. And then you have the second pope and the third pope and the fourth pope, except they were not called popes. They were just all bishops.
Yes.
But over the centuries, the bishops of Rome would say, I would have more authority than you other bishops.
Yep.
And so they would, say, okay, now we're going to say pope. And so, like, we have Pope Leo the First from the year 440 to 461, or Pope Gregory the First. And those two popes are pretty key because they strengthen that authority. They kind of put it up all there. It started to create a hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
And that dominated the western part of the Christian church. And so the Eastern Church, again, didn't follow this model. So they didn't like this. And this is the areas that you're talking about. This is like Turkey and
Asia Minor. Yeah.
But the Western Church, especially those around Rome, started to adhere to this kind of structure. And it would eventually lead to people that would come out, the reformers that would come out in the 14 and 1500s, where they would say, actually, this is not right. This is not true. We only have one mediator, because the development of the papacy changed from them just being simple bishops overseeing other bishops to now they're a supreme authority in the church, and what they say is now cathedra. You know what I mean? What they say could be the word of God. And so we see this evolution of eventually what we will see as now the Roman Catholic Church. And so that's why this is important.
Yeah, and from the development of the Roman Catholic Church, we see later on the reformers coming out, right? And so I guess what we're doing is we're building up to how the Roman Catholic Church was first even created, how this came about, and then how now the reformers, they came out of it, and now how even through the church in Scotland, Presbyterianism came about.
Yeah, let's really quickly go over the Carolingian Renaissance in the 8th and 9th centuries and why they're important. So every time there's a council or there's some kind of controversy, something happens, and then any kind of reform that happens, there's a reason why. And so there was a reform that was happening in the 8th and 9th centuries, which we'll call the Carolingian Renaissance, and it actually did reinforce the Western Church's dominance, and it actually even made the Eastern Church more separate from them. But Charlemagne's reforms were good reforms. They actually promoted religious revival in Western Europe, and it was about education. Charlemagne established schools. He invited scholars like Alcuin of York then to standardize education. He would teach people Latin, grammar, and theology. He would, in the end, promote uniform liturgy. What the reform was really brought about Bible is because there were all these corrupt church practices. So because the church started to see corruption, especially for Charlemagne, it was monastic practices like these monks. They were too political, too powerful. They were doing all these evil things behind the doors. People would want reform, and this reform was not only spread, but it was welcome because people wanted this. And then the good part about that, or what happened in the aftermath of that, is we saw a lot of art come in, and we saw like architecture being affected. We saw people preserving texts and reading more, or listening more rather, and then seeing how we could preserve Christian culture. And so it did, in the end, it did strengthen the Western Church, which got the Eastern Church a little bit mad because it started to gain a lot of influence and dominance over the region. But it was because of the necessary reforms that needed to take place. There was a lot of corruption. And so there was corruption in the church, reforms happened. And you see this kind of continuing on with the Cluniac reforms, where it started from Cluny, the monastery of Cluny, where there would be the only monastery that wasn't under the region, but it was directly under the papal authority. And so what they did then was they exposed all these issues that the church had, and then would bring about reform. And so that's why they're called the Cluniac reforms. They wanted to have good monastic life, ecclesiastical life, And so this is where you see the abbot of, the monastery in Cluny really have a profound impact on what had happened. I think his name was Abbot Otto or Odo. And then there are other abbots that came in afterwards. Abbots are the head of monasteries.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we see a reform and almost a revival of monasteries because of all these reforms and this cleaning up. And so when the monasteries are reformed, then the society is reformed. That's how people thought about it, and that's what we saw. But one of the things that also happened was it strengthened papal authority even more, because this monastery in particular, even though it brought about the reforms, they aligned with the Pope. So they gave the Pope that kind of power, right? And that kind of they gave the Pope that much more influence.
And there is a difference. I just wanted to kind of point out between the Holy Roman Empire, of which Charlemagne was emperor, versus the Western Roman Empire. Right, there is a difference.
What's the difference?
I believe the difference was, I think when we think about Roman Empire, we think about the Western Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire was after the fall. It was kind of like a loosely gathered number of states that tried to revive the Western Roman Empire, to my understanding.
Okay. I'll take that.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay. Just wanted to make that difference, because I think when people read a Roman Empire versus Holy Roman Empire, it's different. And Charlemagne was a Holy Roman Emperor. Just wanted to clear that up. Okay.
Yeah, so going from here all the way back to the Council of Jerusalem, it's about adhering to right doctrine. It's about exposing corruption or evil and making sure that the church is following what the Bible dictates. It has to go back to biblical reform. Otherwise, it's not reform. So even when they were, let's say, going to a governance model, it had to have been a model that was biblical. Otherwise, it's not really good, So things like reforms or cleaning house or making sure corruption is not there, they're going to the Bible and they're taking these, things that were not supposed to be there out.
And I think this is helpful for us to kind of know the roots of where we come from, right? Because I think oftentimes as Protestants, we're so anti-Roman Catholic Church that we believe that this has nothing to do with us. But the point of the Reformers was to go back to the original church, is to go back to the Apostolic Church. And so that's what we're trying to focus on here. that's it from my end.
Yeah.
So we'll continue this history lesson and this study next week with the schism, and further on talking about even John Calvin. What did I say? John Calvin?
Mm-hmm.
Henry Cavill? John Calvin and John Knox as well. A lot of Johns here that we'll talk about next week.
Yeah.
But before we end today's episode, I did want to talk about some current events that are happening that are pretty in your face, blaringly so. The biggest news item of the day that is circulating our world is the LA riots. These are the riots, quote unquote, peaceful protests that have been happening in response to ICE and the work that they're doing in Los Angeles in particular. And I believe as of this recording, President Trump has deployed not only the National Guard, but also the Marines to Los Angeles. And I think, when we see something like this, it's hard to sometimes discern between all the things that are coming at us, to discern what is true and what is good. And so I wanted to just take some time to kind of talk about these things, especially because there are Christians that are coming out and supporting these riots and what is happening. So I want to just take a moment to do that. There are 3 videos that I wanted to show. Brian, if you could cue up the first one, and I'll play that for us now, just as a reminder. Huge.
I've been a little bit frustrated as a Korean American Christian who loves social media and believes that my platform should reflect who I am as a person and my beliefs. A lot of my peers right now don't really understand why I'm so heated with what's happening in LA and honestly throughout our country. But, I just want to give you a friendly reminder that if your amazing parents brought you here for opportunity, also brought you here in faith in God, then you should know that every week you recited the Pledge of Allegiance in your American public school, and it says liberty and justice for all. Not for some, liberty and justice for all. And if not all people are having liberty and justice, that should bother you. Second, as a Christian, Jesus was famous for helping the poor. Jesus was famous for helping quote unquote aliens because he was one himself. Another friendly reminder.
So a couple things. I didn't know that Jesus was an alien.
I mean, he is from out of the planet.
I guess if you think about it that way, sure, he's an alien in that sense. But he was not an alien in Jerusalem, nor was he ever an illegal alien. And I don't know if he ever helped illegal aliens. The time that he helped the Samaritan was in Samaria.
Oh, he's the alien.
So what illegal aliens did he help, miss? Very confused about that, first of all. That's just the first thing. Sorry. And liberty and justice for all means they should leave. That's just, okay, sorry. So, I guess just reeling it back. Kind of reeling it back in here. The argument here is, and I'm afraid that a lot of people may think this. If you came to America for opportunity, if you are the descendant of an immigrant, then you need to be on the front lines for this cause because this pertains to you as well. You went through something like this. That's kind of the narrative that's going around, right? So then you should know that there is liberty and justice for all, not just for some. And not only that, if you're a Christian, not only an immigrant, but if you're a Christian, Jesus was famous for helping the poor. I don't know if that's a true thing. I don't know if he was like...
Yeah, Jesus wasn't famous for helping the poor.
Yeah, I don't know if that's...
It's fine. I mean...
Yeah. And also, Jesus was famous for helping aliens.
Yeah.
So that's just not true, though. So I don't know, like...
I mean, she only gave a few short propositions, so we could tackle them.
And it's a TikTok. I get it.
Yeah.
It's not a theology lesson. I get it. It's a TikTok.
We could tackle it one by one, and I think this will help us understand some of the other things. So first, what did she say? What was the first proposition she made?
That if you came here with your amazing parents, if your amazing parents brought you
liberty
here,
and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all, because you said it during the Pledge of Allegiance, so you better have meant it.
Yeah. So liberty means what, right? And justice means what,
Right.
So I think what she meant by it, and what some people think is like if ICE rounds up illegal immigrants and deports them, that is not liberty and that is not justice. That makes sense?
Yeah.
I think that's what the insinuation is. I think people would probably disagree with that. Liberty for those that are here, that are law-abiding citizens, or that have come and have some proper documentation. They have a visa or they're a permanent resident, whatnot. Then they also get extended some of those protections. But let's say someone who, willingly breaks the law by crossing our borders illegally, should they also get liberty and justice? And that's where I think some of the people are like, oh yeah, they obviously have to, because this is a human thing.
That's what it becomes.
Yeah. And so if they need justice, then yes. I do believe liberty and justice for all. And I do believe that you cannot impinge on another person's liberty by coming here illegally and also taking away their property, their tax money, all that stuff. I think that's an impingement on other people's liberty. Also, justice for all is absolutely true. So just going with her argument, we should have justice for all. So if you have broken the law, you should pay the penalties for breaking the law. And so what is the penalty of breaking the law by crossing over here illegally? Well, there is a civil fine, and you get deported so that you don't continually break the law. Because once you cross the border illegally, it's not like you're here, you're good, you only did one thing. The whole time you're here, you're actually continually breaking the law, because you shouldn't have crossed the border, and that means you need to go back on the other side. And so there's that for liberty and justice. I do agree that we should have liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I wasn't lying when I said that in first grade.
Yeah.
Here's the second video.
Oh, the second part. We didn't do the other part.
Oh, sorry. Jesus was famous for helping the poor, and Jesus was famous for helping aliens.
Yeah. That's not. Should we not even do that? Because that's kind of. You can get all worked up again.
He helped the. Did he help the poor?
We refer them to the immigration episode, because we talked about this stuff.
So
yeah,
I would like to refer you to our immigration episode, if that is the case.
Did he help the poor?
Did he actually help the poor, though?
Did he give him money?
Yeah. What did he do to help the poor?
Did he give him jobs?
He healed the sick.
Oh, he gave him bread.
He gave them bread, but I don't know if they were poor. He healed the sick. He healed the lame. He gave sight, and he preached. Did he help the poor? I guess some of them could have been poor.
I mean, the poor and the destitute are the people that were without the gospel.
It's poor in spirit, right?
Yeah. And
Not without 2 pennies. That's not.
I think we've inserted the social gospel to such a degree.
Yep.
Even like this poor woman here believes that the social gospel is what is important in the Jesus gospel, because James would eventually go and talk about if I share the gospel, but the person's like hungry, I don't even feed them. What am I doing? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So people took that as the social gospel, not understanding what James was really talking about. But it's fine, and we could tackle it one by one. I think the sad part is no one taught you this when you were a kid, and now as an adult, you believe that this is what the Bible means, when this is not how historically the church has ever read it. Right? The church has never read Jesus help the poor, meaning he was like, bring your poor, bring your destitute, bring them to me, because I'm going to give them welfare checks. That's not what Jesus meant. I hope that makes sense.
I can't think of a single instance where he helped the poor. Maybe I'm wrong. The only instance that I could think of when he talked about the widow that gave the offering, and how how significant that offering was in comparison to the offering that rich people gave, because she gave her everything.
Yeah, people from all walks of life follow Jesus. We saw the young rich ruler even try to come, and then
That boy was
eventually,
rich.
Yeah, and then we had Nicodemus.
Yeah.
Right, and then we also had
Wasn't Zacchaeus rich too?
Zacchaeus,
The short king.
Joseph of Arimathea.
Yeah.
We had some rich people follow
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So he had a kind of a range of people following him, for sure.
Yeah, that one is interesting. And like you said, I think that assessment is spot on. I think the social gospel has made its way into our minds, and that's how we view Christ now.
Yeah, Christ is only helping out poor people or something like that.
And the gospel has taken a back seat. The gospel becomes, hey, when you're doing the social stuff, then maybe you can share the gospel, but do the social stuff first.
Otherwise, it's not really the gospel.
Right, because you're not really loving them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. This is a pastor in California. So let me tell you a fun story about this pastor. One person visited our church, and upon hearing my voice, for some reason, they thought that I would look like this pastor. And so this pastor is actually known for being a very good-looking man. And so when this person visited our church, they said, "Oh, was Sam here today?" And then some of the members of our church said, yeah. He brought his son Nathan for the first time. He was here, and he did the pastoral prayer. And she was like, "That's who Sam is?" And she was shocked. And she said, "I thought he would look a little bit more like Pastor Will Chung." And so if he's supposed to be good looking, and I am the antithesis of that, apparently.
I don't know who this guy is, so.
But anyway, let's roll the tape, Brian.
One of the greatest privileges of being a pastor is that God seems to have called me in many ways to minister to a diverse group, but specifically to a lot of immigrant families. Over the 18 years of being a pastor, the amount of conversations I have had with sons and daughters who have seen the struggle and the pain and the unique hardships of their families and parents who moved there as a result of escaping poverty, some literally war-torn countries, with one dream: to just give a better future for their family. I'm not up here to make a political statement, but I am here to make a pastoral one and a biblical one. The scriptures are emphatically clear that God has a heart for foreigners. In fact, it says, "I take up the cause of widows, orphans, and foreigners." God also tells his people as they are going into a new land, do not forget that you were once foreigners in a foreign land, and do not mistreat those here who are foreigners, but treat them as native borns, for you yourself were once in Egypt. Jesus even says in Matthew chapter 25, "When I was a stranger, you visited me." And they say, "When did we visit you?" That word stranger in Greek is xenos, which means foreigner. California right now is hurting in different communities. And I'm just up here to say this. If you are filled with fear, anger, or hurt, I'm with you. I'm praying for you. I'm standing with you. These past few weeks, the amount of conversations I have had personally with people who are facing heartbreaking realities that many of us may not be familiar with outside of just news and partisan politics. I'm just here to tell you we need to pray for and stand up for our brothers and sisters who are hurting right now. Father,
I would agree. Yeah, I agree. Well, there's nothing really that I would disagree with. It's just one of the things that he's implying with what he's saying. There's nothing. I wouldn't disagree that we need to be loving to the foreigner.
Oh,
we need
yeah.
to show compassion
Absolutely.
to the stranger.
Yep.
But I would also add that this country accepts more immigrants than any other country in the world.
Yep.
This country alone accepts more immigrants than like even the other like top 5 or whatever it is, right? Other countries,
I
people
think
want to come to this.
even other countries added together.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah,
added
yeah,
together.
yeah.
This country. So the United States of America accepts more immigrants than any other country in the world, and even them combined, I think like the second to fifth place, the United States still, accepts
one.
more immigrants.
Yeah.
We are a very, very open and very kind nation. We are very generous, and you and I are here because of the generosity of this nation and how it does receive immigrants at such a large scale.
Yep.
And so, the fact that we want to be a nation that is kind to the stranger and to the foreigner, to the immigrant, absolutely true. Here's where I would say this is where it was kind of pointing to, if you are here illegally, you have to go back to your country.
What is upsetting is you're putting the illegal immigrant in the same category as the legal immigrant.
Yeah, I mean, so it's no matter what, you have to show kindness to foreigners. I think that would be the argument.
Yeah.
And I go, absolutely.
Oh,
No
yeah.
matter what, we show kindness to the foreigner. And that means they could do whatever they want? No. When we went over this in our immigration podcast, even the foreigner, you're supposed to treat them equally, meaning they need to abide by your laws. So we have a set of laws, and the foreigner and the immigrant, as well as the native born, cannot break those laws. And so we do have a set of laws. You can't break those laws. If you break those laws, there are penalties, there are fines attached to it. And I hope people understand that. If we didn't have those laws, that's fine. But why do we have those laws? Let's get to this, because I think this is going to be a common theme. Why do we have laws like immigration laws? Why do we have immigration laws? Because we have borders. Why do we have borders? Because we are a sovereign nation.
Yep.
If you do not have borders, you are not a sovereign nation. And you are now impinging on the nation's sovereignty to say that you have to accept everyone and anyone who wants to come through our doors whenever they want, because we know we need to be kind. That's absolutely not true. This is a false dichotomy that is being set up to fool people. You have a home. There are borders in your home. There are walls, literal walls, right? Not anybody can come to your home. Are you supposed to show kindness to the stranger?
Yes.
Absolutely. Should you get rid of your door locks? Absolutely not. Why? Because you still need to protect those within your family. So if you have all these people coming over, you can't keep track of them. You don't know who's who because you haven't vetted them. Like Biden's administration alone brought in over 11 million illegal immigrants across the border. 11 million. And people are going nuts because what do we deport now? Like 200,000, 300,000, something like that, right? We deported a few 100,000 and people are going nuts. We got to deport all those 11 million that came in the last 4 years of Biden's presidency and more. And the fact that other people are getting deported, and maybe they were here, you get these one-off stories like, oh, I basically, this is the only country I know because I came here when I was a kid. I've been here illegally without papers for 20 years. And you're like, 20 years, bro? What are you doing for 20 years living illegally here in the States? You got to fix that. You have to fix that because eventually someone's going to come after you. Someone's going to say, this is the law and you have to abide by it. And then what? You're just going to be mad? You're just going to be mad all day? Because why? What is the purpose of the state and what's the purpose of the government? It's to protect its citizens. One of them is to protect its citizens from threats within and from without, from foreign and domestic threats. And that's why we have the Marines that are coming in, because their oath is we protect our nation from threats, foreign and domestic.
Yep.
And we have all these riots now going on. And people are like, oh, it's just a small part of LA. It's like, yeah, okay. If I had riots going on in the town of Ridgefield, this is where I live, it's going to affect every other town around it. Traffic's going to be stopped. No one can get to the bridge. It's going to be mayhem. So it's just a small part of LA. Get out of here. Nothing works like that.
That's a weird kind of thought process.
People keep on saying that it's only this small segment of LA because LA is huge that a lot of these riots and these protests are happening. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry. It doesn't work like that. When you have something like this, it affects the whole county. It affects the whole city.
And tell me how you're fighting for illegal immigrant rights as you're looting an Apple store. How does that work?
No, that's just those are all bums. They're not. They're just taking advantage of chaos.
Yep.
So we have a chaotic situation, and people will always take advantage. Just like when COVID hit and they had these loans go out, all these people were scammers, and they would take advantage of that. So we always have these scammers that go in. What has to happen though is the government needs to come in and arrest those guys. They need to arrest those guys that have been scamming people, taking out loans illegally, right? And taking away the taxpayer money because they thought it was free money or something like that. Same thing. You got to arrest those people, give them the due penalty for breaking property, destroying, damaging property, vandalizing property, going inside mom and pop stores, not just Adidas and Apple, but these mom and pop stores who have nothing to live on except the store that they have. They broke into those stores and they looted those stores. Now they have nothing. You're not saying jack about them. Say something about them. Look, if you're doing something and you're like afraid of this and I want to stand with you, that's great. Stand with them. Say, now you have to abide by the law. Let me help you do that the best I can so that you're not continually breaking the law. That's a good pastor.
Yep.
Just like in one of our church discipline episodes, I believe we talked about this one discipline case where this guy evaded taxes and he was put under church discipline. But this is government stuff. What do you mean? Because you're evading taxes. You are a lawbreaker. You can't be a lawbreaker and still be a member of the church in good standing. You need to abide by the law unless it goes against God's law. So this is their thinking. They have elevated the social justice to say this is God's law. And so they have elevated it to say no matter what, the immigrant is righteous and pure. No one can do anything to the immigrant because they're the epitome of the righteous because of intersectionality, because of social justice and all that. Because
they suffer.
Because of their suffering, right? And so they can do no wrong. If anybody tries to harm them or try to impede anything that they're trying to do, they are now in the wrong. So that's why the government is wrong. And so the government now can't even follow through, enforcing their own laws.
Protecting their own citizens.
Their own citizens. Now we have mom and pop stores who are there barely making it month by month, and it's all gone. It's all looted. It was burned. This one mom and pop immigrant jewelry store in LA County was looted and robbed. Nobody talks about that. Their lives are ruined. The dad was out there in tears crying because he can't support himself. He has nothing now. He has nothing. And there's nothing he could do about it because they just looted it because it was this. They were saying, this is riots are the language of the oppressed or something like that. They would say things like that. And so now we have all this injustice and chaos being promulgated and promoted. And instead of speaking out and speaking justly, you are now going to say something true, but it's going to be one-sided, going to be put emotionally and just put on one side. I'm going to put a lot of emotion on it. I'm going to just continue to push one side, and then say things like, this is not going to be political. This is just going to be biblical. And then just promote one side of a biblical argument. Because what else does the Bible say? That foreigner has to abide by your laws. That's what the Bible says. Where's that? Promote that. What about God who is just? Yep. A nation must have sovereignty to be a nation. That means it must be able to enforce its own borders. Those are all very basics. Look, I feel bad, and I told you some stories about people that I knew that were deported. I feel terrible. I wish it didn't go that way. But give me another option. Give me another option that they stay here, continually breaking the law. And so, is that the other option? We had a sister who was here and her visa ran out, and she wanted to stay here longer. And something happened with her immigration lawyer where they messed up her paperwork because she was supposed to be here.
Yeah.
This was the immigration lawyer's fault. These guys are bad people, these immigration lawyers. So she couldn't extend her visa or get to stay.
Yep.
And she really desperately wanted to stay here. What did this sister do? We offered her everything that we possibly could as a church. We offered her everything we possibly could. But she decided, you know what? I want to abide by this country's and nation's laws. And so she went back home to Korea. And so she's not with us right now, which, a lot of brothers kind of very sad about.
You know what she said that really stood with me? Not stood with me. I guess it could also stand with me. But when someone asked her, like, hey, like, aren't you scared about your future? Aren't you scared about what's going to happen for the rest of your life? Like, you grew up here. Like, aren't you scared? And she said, I fear God more. I thought.
Yeah, so here's the other argument that I can foresee happening. But these guys, a lot of these guys have been, running away. They're escaping.
Yeah. War-torn countries.
Poverty,
cartels.
Right, cartels. And so isn't that ironic, though? For them to have come here, they actually use cartels. So they use the cartel to come across the border. So I think some people are, I hope they're not, but some people are so naive and they start to think that, oh, these guys just happen to be on the border and they decided to just walk over. It doesn't work like that. The cartel controls the entire southern border. And so for you to cross the border, you got to pay them money. They make billions and billions of dollars of poor, naive, destitute people that really want to come to this country for a better life. And they pay these cartels thousands of dollars and they owe them allegiance after. So I don't know if you've heard, I think we talked about it. Some of these young girls will have bracelets on, and depending on the color bracelet, it was what type of slavery, sexual slavery, whatever slavery that they were going to be fixed into to pay their debt. The cartel is an evil, evil, demonic organization. So for the people to come here, and if we continue to say, oh, anybody could come here, guess who's getting all this money? Guess who's getting more power? So to not understand the economics of all these things that are happening is, I don't know if it's simply naivete or you are just saying, I'm going to turn a blind eye to this because I don't care about that. I care about the people in my church or something really generic to that point, to that effect. And I think that that's absolutely wrong. You can't say that and say, I'm not going to be political. It's absolutely political, and you are on the wrong biblical side then of that political debate. Because what you want to do is you want to show kindness to the foreigner, absolutely, and you want to lead them to a place where they will not break the law. That's what you want to do. Because you can't continually say breaking the law is okay and then say, oh, anybody could just rush into the States. We're not a sovereign nation. We're just a land for everybody. And then you buy into this was stolen land. California was originally part of Mexico.
Yep.
And we're freeing it from this colonialism. Oh, you mean before it was Mexico, California was part of Spain? The Spaniard colony,
right?
That's what you're saying. So you want to give it to the Spaniards? Is that what? None of these things make any sense to these. If you continually just do maybe 1 level, 2 levels of research and study to show that California being a part of Mexico is not a thing. It's not a thing, and yet this is what people are espousing and shouting at the top of their lungs at while they're protesting. And things of that nature. And so I find it very unfortunate that we have people that are so biblically illiterate that they are falling for this this toxic empathy and saying, oh, Jesus helped the poor. Jesus always sided with the immigrant. No, he said pay taxes to Caesar. Yep. He said give to Caesar what's Caesar and give to God's what's God's. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's. That means if Caesar demands this and you're living under his rule, then give it to him. Here's the laws of the country. Abide by those laws. Stop saying go against Caesar and saying I'm with Jesus. I'm going to go against Caesar. Jesus didn't even say that. What about that part of the Bible? Why don't people talk about that? Why is it always somehow this empathetic leftist agenda that all these so-called preachers or some people that are self-identify as Christians, that's what they're espousing on TikTok? Man, I hate TikTok. But
I think it sells. It sells. People
I mean,
love it.
I
People
guess
eat it
I
up.
guess that's what the young people. So if you're on TikTok, you become this. You got all your theology from TikTok, and I'm sorry to hear that. Stop going to churches that don't teach you the full breadth of the Bible, that don't go exposition, but eisegete everything. That always say Jesus was this. It's almost like that show Chosen. The Bible is enough, so let me start inserting stuff. Let me start inserting, oh, this was white noise in the Bible. Let me draw in some of the background
Like
that
filler
I think.
episodes.
Yeah, let me put that in there. So Jesus really did this in before, and he probably would have said this. And so you have
probably would have said this.
You have a show like The Chosen that is extremely popular, and people get their theology from shows like Chosen. They think Jesus was actually like that when he was probably not anything. He's probably nothing like that. Nothing like that. And so this is incredibly unfortunate. I hope that people can, really, really go to a good Bible-believing church. And as a member, you will do all the things, the breadth of the gospel and what the Bible teaches, to be kind to the foreigner, to have the foreigner follow your laws, to continually promote good in society, to protect your citizens, to have a sovereign nation. These are all biblical concepts. Don't move the boundary stone. That's right in Proverbs that your forefathers have set. There are boundaries there. Don't move it. Don't think, oh, well, what about 17 generations ago? I know these people had it, so I want to move it. It's like, nope, you can't do that. Sorry. It says that in the Bible. And so those are things I hope that people will start to be educated on, especially those that are listening to our podcast.
Okay. I think this is really helpful because right now there's a lot of chatter online. And I think it's interesting that a lot of this is being picked up in the Asian immigrant community. As if our experience as immigrants is all supposed to be the same. As if because we are immigrants, we are to stand for the illegal immigrant. But there is a distinction. There is a difference. There are people from Latin America. There are people from Central and South America that are legal immigrants. And so...
Yeah, watch for the one-sided. Either you could be like, I hate all immigrants. Everybody needs to go back to their country, which is wrong.
Yep.
And there's the other extreme where it's like anybody who wants to come, who wants a good life, we should give it to them.
And
which doesn't make any sense.
And I love your analogy of a house because that's what this country is, right? You pay taxes to the government to protect the people within the government, within the country. And kind of like you were saying with a house, if an uninvited guest comes in, you treat them still as a human being. At the same time, you do your best to have this person leave your house.
Yeah.
Why would,
and if they're not going to leave, you forcibly remove them.
Like if they climbed in through a window, you're in here, you're just like my son, I guess I'm going to treat you like my son. How does that make any sense?
Oh, I've been here a few hours. Can I just stay here a few hours more?
Yeah. It's like, no, can you just please leave now? I mean, what? Like you're not treating them as a lesser person, but you would have them leave your house because this is your house.
This is one show I saw. This is completely a side note, but
was it a fun show?
It was about a house.
Oh.
They were doing some kind of documentary, and they found this hidden corridor.
Whoa!
And then it would lead to behind the bedroom.
Whoa!
And there were like candy wrappers and like people. Somebody was living there.
Oh, I thought you meant it was like a little snack room where the husband went to go eat snacks. That's why I laughed.
Someone was living there,
what?
and they still didn't know who it was. Just
what? That's like that movie Parasite. Oh, I thought
know.
It would be a genius idea if you have a little snack room where the husband can go eat all the snacks he wants and then come back as if nothing happened. I thought that's what this was leading towards. A snack room.
yes.
I would love a snack room.
You wouldn't eat any snacks.
I would just love the room being there.
Yeah, I mean, I commend the immigration episode to you. We went over it in better detail. We went over the economics of it all. If you want to, let's say, make your house big enough to invite another guest, then you want to make sure that they have all the opportunities that can be allotted to them. So you want to make sure that you can, have the room for them. And that's why there is a legal way of coming, which I believe all these people that are complaining on TikTok came here, they came here legally, or their parents or grandparents, their ancestors somehow came here legally, not illegally.
And I think so. Some people may argue, well, the legal process takes way too long. It's too slow. These people need to get out now. And I get it. And we discussed refugee status before on the immigration episode. But what I also think is really condescending that a lot of these people are in the statements that they're making is that what you're pretty much saying is, oh, these people can't go back. Like, not all of Mexico is like that. Not all of wherever every illegal immigrant came from is a terrible hell of a place to live. And so there's people living in those countries that are happy, that are Christian, that are good, God-fearing. Not every country that these people come from is hell. And I feel like that's the narrative that people are painting. They can't go back there. The moment they get back there, they're going to die. People live there. People live in these countries, and it's really condescending for you to think that your country is so much better that they can never go back there, or else they're just going to die.
I mean, America is the greatest country.
It is
in the
number
world.
one. I'm not saying it's number two, but there is an arrogance of people thinking they can't go back there. That's a country too. People live there.
I mean, there are people coming from war-torn countries. So you know what this is eventually going to do? Whether it's a Democrat or Republican, I don't think it matters. Eventually, this is going to lead to martial law, a police state. And this, I think John MacArthur said this like 10 years ago or something like that too. But you continue to have chaos in the streets. Government needs to have more power. This is just what it is.
Yeah.
Because you need a police force. And then if you have a police state, all your liberties will be slowly stripped away. Follow the laws. Abide by the laws. You want a good law-abiding country. Citizens that will follow the laws. That's what makes the nation prosperous. And so to promote lawlessness is actually evil. I hope people don't do that. I hope people are not promoting, by saying you need to be kind to your neighbor, I hope you're not promoting illegal entry into the states. I hope you're not doing that. Oh, but what if they're already here? Then there is self-deportation. But if you're caught, you're going to be deported, by ICE or whatever, authority that captured you. And so there are bad ways to go. There are good ways to go. And let's say you're not caught. Let's say you just stay here illegally. And then what? For how long? What are you going to do, man? It's like you're going to barely make it by. And so there are all these things. It's remittances that the Congress is trying to pass, right? So a lot of these illegal immigrants will come here, they'll make money, and they'll send it to Mexico.
Right, their families.
And so the United States is going to tax that, and Mexico got so mad. And so the Mexican president, Sheinbaum, I think her name is, came out and said, she's going to promote like protests in the streets or something like that. In America, obviously. She's not going to protest in Mexico. And so illegal immigration has caused so many problems that we're just scratching the surface when we're saying, oh, there's crime because of these illegal. No, man. Like, I would say 99% of illegal immigrants aren't like violent criminals. They're not. But so should they stay? Because that's not the standard. The standard isn't, oh, you haven't committed a violent crime, they should stay. The standard is you can't break laws. Something happens, not just to the economy, but the people around you, to the state of the nation. Look at what's happening now because we've allowed so many illegal immigrants come. We have these young people just brainwashed from TikTok to thinking that illegal immigration is a good thing because they were immigrants, as if they were the same thing.
Right.
And so there's all these bad things happening. I hope people will get to the bottom of it. People will be educated on the matter. Again, the immigration podcast is a good one. So we won't say everything that we said before. Yeah,
I mean, I hope this is helpful. I think there's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of opinions that are flying out there that are unbiblical and unwise. And
Here's my hot take that people will disagree with, though, even if you're on the right side. Can I give a hot take?
Sure, absolutely. The hottest of takes.
Yeah. Christians don't protest.
Oh, like, okay. Okay. I'm not going to say anything.
We're Protestants. We're protesting against the Roman Church.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean by protest. We don't go out there on the streets, wave flags, and burn cars.
Oh,
Christians,
no.
Christians don't do that.
No.
We don't go there shouting with
No.
signs and things like that.
No.
Peaceful protest, what does that mean? And so we're not there to cause dissension. If anything, you would protest by making, your side known by the available means that are out there.
Yeah.
So going out there and marching and all that stuff, Christians don't do that. Christians have never done that. You saw Martin Luther going out there marching.
Even the Protestant Reformation was not like that.
It wasn't like that.
No.
They wanted to spread the truth, so they put out pamphlets, they spread out media.
Had
They
debates.
spoke in debates in
Yeah.
churches.
Yeah.
They didn't go there marching out on the streets. And then when people get wild, people, oh, yeah, just keep it peaceful, you guys. Christians have not historically done that. So that's my hot take. You can agree or disagree with that one. But that is a hot take for me.
That's a good one. I stand behind your hot take.
Oh, yeah? What about the American Revolution?
The Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. I don't know. But I hope this part of the episode is also helpful as well because, like, we were talking about, there's a lot of rhetoric out there that's unbiblical, unwise. And so hopefully we can continue to discern what is good and what is pure and what is wise, what is biblical, and continue to stand on that.
Yep. Sounds good.
We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we will continue with part 2 of our church history series. I guess 2-part series. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.